Hello and welcome to Lancaster Safety's Webinar Wednesday. My name is Emily and I am an OSHA online training coordinator here with Lancaster Safety. I'm joined today by Cindy, who is our Director of Services, for today's presentation on what safety training is required. So if you've been doing any research to determine what OSHA training is required, you might have come to the conclusion that there isn't really a straightforward answer available. So our goal today is to guide you in the right direction, and we want to help your company discern between what's required and then what would be beneficial.
Thanks, Emily. If you've sat in on one of our webinars before, then welcome back. And if you are new here, allow us to take a moment for an introduction. We here at Lancaster Safety are a nationwide OSHA compliance firm. We specialize in keeping employees safe on the job while also keeping businesses compliant. We've been recognized by OSHA as a VPP Star Mobile Workforce, which is a very prestigious recognition. We've worked directly with and alongside OSHA officers, and even have a few former OSHA officials on our team as well. Our team is truly passionate about safety. We host various safety and health webinars for free to help provide information that might just help prevent accidents for you.
All right, so let's just go ahead and kick off with an Insta Safety quiz. True or false? If your company is inspected by OSHA and you didn't know that employees needed to be trained on a specific topic, OSHA will not hold you responsible. So you can use the chat box below to put in your answer. All right, Cindy, is that one true or false?
That is a great question, Emily. The answer here is false. OSHA must hold companies responsible for complying with the outlined rules and regulations, including required safety training. Now, sometimes OSHA will take into consideration an employee's effort to comply. This is something known as good faith. However, their ultimate goal is still ensuring employee safety and will require the training to be completed.
All right, so now that we've tested you early on, let's dig into what you can expect from today's discussion. So we're going to talk about what training topics are required and then also look at what frequency they're required. So is that initially, annually, or periodically? We'll talk about what employees need to attend the training. So do you need every employee in a training for all topics? We'll talk about that. What options are there for training? And then we'll talk about what retraining requirements there are.
Great, I'm excited to dig into everything. We'd also like to note that the information and training requirements that are outlined in this presentation are for informational purposes only. It's crucial to review OSHA's regulations in full to determine if additional training requirements apply to your employees and your company. If you have additional questions at the summation of this presentation, give LCI a call and we'd be happy to give you an answer.
So first up, what safety training is required, and do employers need to spend money getting all of their employees trained?
Yes, all employees need to be trained on the applicable hazards that they are exposed to because every person's safety matters. There are some exemptions, but it is still the employer's responsibility to create a workplace free from recognized hazards, and training is one of the key factors to eliminating these hazards. Safety and health training requirements are not one size fits all. The hazards that employers will come across in the construction field will differ from those working in a manufacturing plant.
All right, so let's say that we have a manufacturing plant with employees working in the office and on the floor. Do all of those employees need the same safety training?
So safety training requirements are going to vary within a company as well. For example, in this situation at a manufacturing plant, the employees working in the office are going to receive different safety training from those working on the plant floor. They only need to be trained on hazards they're exposed to, such as emergency action planning, fire safety, bloodborne pathogens, ergonomics, and office safety. Additional topics may apply if they venture out onto the plant floor, even if they're still not operating equipment. This is what we help companies with on a daily basis, determining what topics apply to them and working out the small details. Question here, why train? The answer to this might seem obvious, but to set our direction for today's webinar, keep in mind the reason we train beyond what's just required. We want to keep employees safe. We want everyone to have a good mindset, and this will result all positive outcomes. We'll prevent accidents, lost workdays, reduce workers' comp costs, and avoid costly OSHA fines. And lastly, OSHA requires safety training, so it is the law.
Okay, so now we're on to the big question for this presentation. What safety training is required?
OSHA requires that employers provide training for all applicable occupational hazards that employees may be exposed to in the workplace in a language and vocabulary that all workers can understand. Any company that has employees who speak different languages needs to have either an interpreter present for the training or have multiple training sessions conducted in the different languages. In addition, written program materials and signage also needs to be in a language that employees can understand if they don't speak or understand English. LSCI has bilingual trainers on board with us, so please contact us for more information if you're in a tough spot putting all of this together.
And you said before that office personnel would still need training, correct?
Yes, employees working in the office need to be trained too, but only on the areas where they're exposed to hazards in the workplace, like the ones previously discussed. Employees working in the field or in a manufacturing plant will likely be exposed to more hazardous conditions and therefore need more training. Training should be conducted constantly to ensure employee safety.
So that makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way to ensure that all employees are properly trained. We just had our annual training here at LSCI last month, and it was really beneficial, even for myself, and I do work primarily in the office. So I'm sure everyone here would like to know exactly what topics apply to them. So where can they go, Cindy, to find those answers?
That's a great question, Emily. There are several resources available to help your company choose the right safety and health training topics. First, you can go to the source of safety and health laws by browsing OSHA.gov or by calling your local OSHA area office. OSHA has a 250-page training requirements guide that you can read on their publications page on their website. Or another option is to call us, where you can reach us at 888-403-6026, and our team will walk you through a step-by-step phone evaluation to handpick the topics that may apply to your business. There's no fee and no obligation.
So what can somebody expect from the phone consultation? We're going to figure out, do all employees need to attend safety and health training, and which topics are required by OSHA? We're going to ask you, how do you train employees over multiple shifts and locations? Once an employee is trained, do they need to be retrained? How often does safety training need to be conducted? Does OSHA accept different training formats like online, hands-on, or classroom? And those are all types that we can provide for you. And then, are there benefits to conducting training on topics that are not required? So we'll discuss all of that in the phone consultation. All right, to give our viewers an idea of what topics do apply to most businesses, we've included a list here. And Cindy's going to touch briefly on why these topics are the most common.
Thanks, Emily. Safety and health training requirements are definitely not one size fits all, like we've mentioned. The hazards that employees will come across in the construction field will differ from those working in a manufacturing plant. However, there are some hazards that every company will face, and we're going to discuss those here now. To start off, we have an employee's rights and responsibilities and knowing what OSHA is. They also have to read OSHA's labor poster. Next up is HAZCOM, or hazard communication. What company doesn't use some type of chemical or hazardous materials? Us working in an office environment, you wouldn't think that we would have too many, but we actually have a pretty lengthy SDS log. Next up is emergency action planning and fire safety. This is another one that is relevant across the board. Even when employees are working outside, they need to know what to do if there's an emergency like a fire or a natural disaster. PPE, or personal protective equipment. Not all companies require their employees to wear PPE every day, but almost all companies have the need to use PPE at some point or another. A lot of items may be provided to employees for voluntary use. Now, even if it is voluntary, they still need to know the proper way to use the PPE and maintain it so that it's effective. Okay, moving along, we have bloodborne pathogens. This pairs with first aid and CPR training. We don't always know when an accident or health-related incident may occur, but it's best to be prepared. You can train your entire team or designated individuals. Ergonomics. Something that most people could improve on is their posture and lifting techniques. As you're sitting right now at your desk, are you sitting with your back upright or are you hunched over and relaxed? Keep that in mind. And last up here, we have driving. This is one of the biggest hazards for all of us. Whether you're driving to and from work or if you're driving on the job, everyone can use extra driving training. This diagram here takes a look at common topics that might apply to businesses that are in construction or general industry. The topics in the middle are some of the ones we just looked at on the previous slide. These topics will most likely apply to everyone regardless of what industry they're in. From there, take a look at the left or the right. Are you in general industry? Then take a look at the left blue circle. If you're in construction, then take a look at the right teal circle to see which topics might apply. These topics would be in addition to the topics in the middle.
Now, not all of these topics on the left and right will apply. So if you don't use forklifts, for example, then you don't need forklift training. Understanding which of these topics apply to your business can be confusing. So again, we just recommend giving us a call for any questions. Now that we've discussed some of the training topics that need to be covered, let's look at when you actually need to train.
Great. So here's a list of some of OSHA's training topics that are required to be trained initially for those exposed. Now, initial training means upon hire or at the initial assignment of a new job or process. Keep in mind that initial training isn't the end all. Employees should be trained on these topics as they apply to their exposure to hazards in the workplace. Additional or refresher training should also be conducted annually or periodically based on OSHA's requirements.
We here at LSCI, we have a broad spectrum of clients across the country, from construction companies, manufacturing plants, veterinary offices, and so many more. One of the biggest struggles that companies face is meeting OSHA's initial training requirements. And so while it is difficult to sacrifice, manpower and spend the first few days of hire in training, it's even more difficult to deliver a devastating phone call to an employee's family about an accident. LSCI has diligently worked to develop an initial new hire training program that offers an introduction to safety in the workplace for your employees.
Next, we have listed the most prevalent safety training topics that are required to be reviewed on an annual basis. To some companies, annual training might sound like a lot, but when you consider all the safety hazards that might be present at one time, annual training really only covers the basics of what is needed. In short, LSCI recommends more frequent training throughout the year. There are also several factors to take into consideration when planning your company's annual training, such as higher risk industries, employees' retention and comprehension levels, and logistics of production downtime.
Okay, so when you say high risk industries, what industries are you talking about?
So employees working in construction, manufacturing, waste treatment, and many other industries are classified as high risk due to the types of hazards that employees are exposed to. They also look at injury data and other factors. Due to the increase in severity of hazards, it's crucial to ensure that employees are receiving adequate training at a more frequent interval than what's initially necessary.
All right, I have one more quick question for you. What are employees' retention and comprehension levels going to even be like?
That's a really good question, and it's a big concern for employers. So take a moment to ask yourself how much you recall from a morning meeting or remember from last week's afternoon conference call. If you're one of the lucky ones with a spot on memory, then you probably remember everything. If not, things like taking notes or having supplemental materials such as handouts or fact sheets make a world of a difference for comprehension. As an employer, it's important to understand that employees' learning styles and comprehension levels aren't equal. While having a 4-hour safety training might be beneficial for some employers, others might be lost after just an hour. Things that we like to incorporate are utilizing different materials such as handouts, fact sheets, quizzes. These all encourage employee involvement and discussion too. Not only is this beneficial during the training, but it also provides employees with materials to take home with them as reminders. Now, some people don't like the idea of quizzing employees on the spot, but it's a great tool to determine employee comprehension level. Try passing out the quiz to complete individually or even in small groups, and then review the information as a whole. This allows employees to use their critical thinking skills on their own, but doesn't single anybody out whenever actually reviewing the information.
Those are all really good suggestions. And I know that just speaking with my clients that I work with daily, they do struggle with meeting everybody's needs and learning styles, for training. So those are all great suggestions. Now, when we're talking about the logistics of production downtime, this can also be a pretty big concern for employers. And we understand that stopping production completely for any period of time can be totally out of the question for some companies. So circling back to the employee retention factors, a 4 or more hour training session may not be the most logical idea for all companies. So Cindy, do you have any recommendations here?
I do, yes. And the great thing is that annual training can be spread out throughout the whole year. It can be broken up into smaller sessions. For example, a company could train on hazard communication in January for all of their employees, and then a different topic in February. They could do multiple sessions, so only a few employees are pulled away from their job at one time. And this also allows for a shorter training session focused on one topic, which increases the employee's retention and comprehension. Emily, I know you mentioned our internal training. We've switched to doing that quarterly, and it's been really great because it allows us to just focus on a few topics at one time and not everything all at once. Now, if you are having trouble meeting OSHA's annual training requirements, give us a call and we'll work with you to put together the best training setup for you. Next up here, we have periodic training. In this case, that means training that's required at least once a year or at a specific frequency, like forklift certification. Listed above are some of OSHA's safety training topics that are required to be reviewed at a periodic frequency. Now that we've reviewed what is required, let's talk about what is recommended. OSHA's training requirements cover initial assignment, annual basis, and more frequently if necessary. But as we previously discussed, just because an employee has been trained once doesn't mean that they are safe for life. Refresher training is always recommended and sometimes even necessary. There are a few factors to keep in mind that strongly result in retraining outside of OSHA's initial, annual, or periodic requirements. This could include after an accident or an employee injury occurs, when new equipment or processes are introduced to the workplace, or if new personnel are introduced to a work process that could affect others.
That's great. And I know a question that I've been asked a lot is if a company should train on the recommended topics on an annual basis. So I just wanted to note real quick that LSCI strongly recommends conducting annual refresher training on all applicable topics for all employees, just as a step above the requirements. So here's a good question. What are the benefits of training on topics that are not required? I'd assume a lot of companies would opt out of training that they didn't have to do, right?
Well, that can be true, but oftentimes employers might find themselves struggling with initiating a good safety culture, where everyone from the newest employee to the top management team are on board with safety. Regular trainings provide safety refreshers for employees and keep safety at the forefront of their thinking. Employers really need to be thinking about safety at work. It also can help employees to understand a certain process or recognize a potential hazard. There are a lot of benefits to training on topics that aren't required by OSHA. Companies sometimes don't think about going above and beyond on OSHA's requirements. That's how we came up with our company's slogan, taking safety beyond the standard. This really says it all. Be as safe as possible, not because you have to, but because you want to keep everyone safe. In addition to the annual and periodic training requirements that we previously discussed, employees should also be retrained if any of the following aspects exist. After an accident or injury or illness may occur, if there's new equipment or processes that are introduced to the workplace, if new personnel are introduced to a work process that could affect others, or if management deems that additional training is necessary. It's important to consider how much information is being presented at a given time. If there's too much information or too long of a training, employees may not retain as much. The more frequent the trainings occur, the more information will sink in.
Since we gear this presentation to cover most industries, we do understand that this information regarding forklifts won't apply to everyone in attendance today, so we're just going to cover it briefly.
Thanks, Emily. Forklift operator certifications and recertifications are in high demand and must be conducted every 3 years, if not more frequently if needed. Personnel designated and trained as trainers do not require retraining. However, we also recommend that forklift trainers be retrained, even though it's not necessary. This can be conducted at the same frequency as operator recertifications or sooner if management deems necessary.
Okay, so for the initial forklift training, what's all involved in that?
Okay, so we have formal instruction, which would include a lecture, discussion, interactive computer learning, could include a video or written material. There's also going to be practical training, like this would include demonstrations that would be performed by a trainer and practical exercises performed by the trainee. And then lastly, we have the evaluation of the operator's performance in the workplace.
I'd also like to just note that it's important for the trainees to know how to drive a forklift before a company schedules a training with us. The forklift training does not include how to actually drive the forklift.
That's a great point to mention. And also to remember that refresher training is needed if any of the following things occur. Operating the vehicle in an unsafe manner, if an accident or near miss incident should occur, or an evaluation that reveals that the forklift operator is not operating the truck safely, the operator is assigned to drive a different type of truck, or the condition in the workplace changes in a manner that could affect safe operation of the truck. If employees working near or exposed to certain equipment, but they aren't the ones operating the equipment, then it is recommended that they have awareness level training on the hazards. Some that we would recommend here would be scaffolding, cranes, aerial lifts, forklifts, or other type of large equipment. I touched on before how some employees in an office environment might walk out onto a plant floor. They wouldn't be the ones operating the equipment, but if they're walking near or around this type of equipment, it's good to have that awareness level of training. We do provide a general awareness, which is an overview of hazards that employees would need to have instead of an operator training. Even if the employer does not own the equipment, employees still need to be trained.
Here's a question that we get asked a lot. Does OSHA require the 10 and 30-hour outreach trainings?
The short answer here is no. It is a voluntary training that provides a consistent look at OSHA's requirements. Some general contractors may require your employees to go through one of these trainings before allowing your company to work on a job site. There also are some states that have their own requirements, including Connecticut, Massachusetts, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and West Virginia. Check out our blog page on our website that goes over outreach trainings and breaks down each state-by-state requirement. It is important to note that outreach training does not meet any OSHA training requirements. Think of it as a one-size-fits-all type of training that ensures specific content is reviewed by attendees. Clients are often surprised when we recommend doing a company-specific training based on the hazard their employees encounter rather than 10 or 30-hour training. This gives us a better opportunity to customize the training to your employee's workplace.
So Cindy, going into more detail here, what is a 10 or 30-hour training and what's required?
Great question. So OSHA's 10 and 30-hour trainings cover the recognition, avoidance, abatement, and prevention of workplace hazards. The course also provides information regarding workers' rights, employer responsibilities, and how to file a complaint. The 10-hour class is designed to provide employees with an awareness level of safety and health hazards in the workplace. And the 30-hour class is typically provided to those in a supervisory position, as it provides a greater depth and variety of training on an expanded level of topics associated with workplace hazards in each industry. OSHA provides authorized trainers with specific procedures and materials for each of the industry's training program level. All right, so we've got another free download for you today. This printout breaks down the subject requirements for 10 and 30-hour trainings. This one pictured is specifically for the construction industry, but we have both for construction and general industry on our website, lancastersafety.com/services/onsite safety training. If you aren't sure which 10 or 30-hour training you want to take, feel free to give us a call and we'll best direct you.
So do all employees need to be trained initially?
Yes. Now, this should be a more obvious answer, but yes, ultimately, employees do need to be trained initially. And remember that initial training means upon hire or at initial assignment of a new job or process. And keep in mind that this isn't the end of the line of training either. Employees should be trained on these topics as they apply to their exposure to hazards in the workplace, and additional or refresher training should be conducted annually or periodically based on OSHA's requirements. Training curriculum should also be reevaluated as employees' job functions change as well.
Now that we've discussed all of the different types of training that are needed, what happens when someone misses training?
Good question. We certainly understand that a few factors play an essential role in organizing training sessions. you've got production, you can't afford to completely break down people and their availability themselves, and then also your classroom size or where the training is going to take place. We'd like to work with you to ensure that all logistics are ironed out so that the appropriate employees are trained on the applicable topics in an efficient manner. Now, if an employee misses a scheduled training, we do have a few options. So makeup trainings can be scheduled. We also offer online trainings based off the written programs to help ensure that just the topics that you need are being presented. And these come in a module format, so they go topic by topic, and we can also provide quizzes to gauge their comprehension. And lastly, our most convenient solution is the online OSHA Training Center, and that is a learning management system that tracks and records all of your team's training's progress as they go. You can set up an assignment with a due date and receive a report showing you their progress.
Now, if you hire a new employee, you want to get them trained before the start of work. Training newly hired employees on applicable safety and health topics is one of our #1 gaps that we see from companies. So if your company is experiencing growth, that's great. If you're hiring left and right, or you just have a high turnover, we have convenient training solutions for you. So let's discuss the different training options for new hire trainings, annual group trainings, or even supervisor trainings. Now, I'd assume the in-person with live trainer option is the most common, isn't it?
It is. In-person training with a knowledgeable safety professional is definitely the most efficient and popular and recommended route of training. Throughout today, we've discussed a lot of different variables that can make the logistics of training difficult, but the most important factor to remember is that the training content is received and understood. LSCI strongly promotes live in-person training and also hands-on training, which provides employees with the opportunity to ask questions, create discussion, and brainstorm together to reinforce that training content and the comprehension. Fortunately enough, we do have safety trainers across the country that specialize in OSHA compliance. Some of them have decades of experience. From retired OSHA officials to certified safety professionals, we've got you covered with the right people.
Online training continues to grow in popularity just because of how convenient and cost effective it can be. However, most online training offers modules that have been predetermined, which means the topics may not apply to your workplace. And so, this is why Lancaster Safety has developed an online OSHA training center that will give your company the ability to complete training just on the topics that you need and at your convenience. And so, we mentioned this option briefly before, and truly, I can't recommend it enough. Our clients have been really happy with it, and we love to help cheer them on. It's so nice to be able to track the completion progress of each employee automatically, and then you have the training records available at a moment's notice, especially if OSHA were to ring your doorbell. So if your company has a hard time scheduling in-person training, definitely give us a call and we'll give you a demo of the system. So next on the list is a live remote training. So Cindy, do you think that's an effective training method?
Yes, this is a great option if you're looking for a bit more flexibility with training your employees. It still gives you the opportunity to have a live instructor and allows the employees to ask questions, create discussion, brainstorm ideas. Now, with this live remote training, we do still recommend doing hands-on and additional training in-house based on the employee's job and what they're exposed to. Now, as we said at the beginning, our main goal is getting you home safely at the end of every day. And in order to do that, remember this: safety isn't something you did, it's something you do. Make it a habit, be alert, pay attention, and look out for hazards. Think of what could go wrong, problem solve, and report hazards along the way. The main goal is to avoid accidents and be safe.
All right, so now we have a quiz question for the audience. And this is another true or false question. The following topics require annual training: fall protection, ladder safety, powered hand tools, arc flash, laser safety, combustible dust, and ergonomics. That's a tough one, so I hope you're paying attention.
The answer here is false, as these topics are recommended to be trained upon based on the employee's exposure.
All right, now the question of the hour. How often do you need safety training?
That's a great question, Emily. This chart that we have here was put together by our in-house consultants in order to simplify the whole question of this webinar. How often do certain topics need to be trained on?
And we want to stress that it is important that you're trained on any safety hazards that you may encounter on the job. And just as a quick thank you for attending today's webinar, we're going to email you a copy of this chart as follow-up.
Now we're coming to a close on today's presentation, so we want to make sure that everyone that watches this presentation has their questions answered. Sometimes figuring out the training topics and OSHA regulations that apply to your business can be super complicated. You can save yourself time and energy by giving us a call and letting us help you answer questions for you. Reach out to us at 888-403-6026 or message us through our website, lancastersafety.com.
All right, everyone. Well, that's going to do it for today. We just wanted to thank you for attending today's webinar. We hope you learned some things about what OSHA training topics are required. From everyone here at Lancaster Safety, thank you so much and have a wonderful, safe day.